There's a lot of things in life that we can't predict. How long we're going to live, what the stock market's going to do tomorrow, or what the cost of goods are going to be in 20 to 30 years from now. Now, if we focus on what we can't control, these unpredictable items, that can only lead to worry. We don't want to worry, so we need to focus on what we can control. So today's episode, we're going to talk about what you can do, no matter the outcome of all of these unpredictable items, to help put yourself in that best position possible.
Welcome to the Your Life, Your Money podcast with Scott Searins, teaching you how to thrive in life, wealth, and retirement.
Welcome into Your Life, Your Money, the podcast helping you thrive in life, wealth, and retirement alongside Scott Searins at the Searins Financial Group. I am Ben George, and we're excited to talk to you today about planning for things that we can't predict. There's so many things in our life that just are unexpected that are going to happen, or just outcomes that we just aren't sure about, but you can put a plan in place that accounts for these things. So we will go through all that today. Scott, how's it going?
Ben, things are great. Thank you very much. Yeah, talking about things we can't predict. You know, I continue to keep my my thumb on the pulse, right? Looking at different news articles. I know a couple of weeks we were speaking about inflation and talk about things we can't predict. I mean, inflation, let's see, in January, they said hitting a new 40-year high, 7.5% year-over-year inflation. I was reading two articles, actually. So one, and we'll link to all of them in the show notes. One was talking about how inflation reached 7.5% in January. But this one I thought really interesting. This one was from CNN, said, prices may be rising, but Americans shopped more than expected in January. So think about that. Prices are going up, which usually, curbs spending.
Right.
But this is saying it's not curbing any spending. People are still going out. They're spending their money. I thought it was pretty interesting. Some stats in here. It says U.S. retail sales rose by 3.8% in January from the month prior, which is more than a 2% increase than what economists had predicted. And then online sales rising 14.5% after posting 11.4% drop in December. Home furnishing stores, department stores posted sizable gains of 7.2%, 9.2%. I just, I think we're constantly hearing about inflation, and a lot of articles can kind of, and we talked about an article, right, that was saying, hey, this is a number one fear of people, but it really doesn't seem to be curbing people's spending. It seems like they're still going out there and, doing what they need to do, buy what they need to buy, where I think in the past we've seen, right, where, I don't know, I'll just give an example, right? Instead of dining out, somebody might stay in, or instead of buying new clothes, they just, whatever they have, they make that work. Or, thoughts on that? It's just, I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I just wonder how sustainable it is. Like, if can we continue to spend with inflation as high as it is for a long stretch of time? I mean, I don't really know. I'm not going to try to act like an expert here at all. That's just the first thing that comes to mind to me is, how long will all money last in that situation if inflation is around for a long time? And I know a lot of people don't think that it will be, so hopefully that's nothing we have to worry about. But if it does continue, are the sales going to continue to be at a high clip?
Yeah, and I think that's what we have to think about is kind of that short-term vision versus that long-term picture. We're just so immersed in it right now, so I think we really feel that pain of inflation, right? That we feel that pain of the cost of something, of our grocery, basket has gone up. But in that long-term picture, I think it's part of that overall economic cycle where, there have been periods in the past of high inflation and then, times where it dwindles out. I mean, we didn't talk about this a couple of weeks ago, but I guess one positive that we have to think about is inflation causes the Federal Reserve to raise rates. And for those that are savers, we always get a lot of questions in, right? Or like, hey, what do I do with all this excess money I'm sitting with in my savings account? And, well, good news for those savings accounts, right? If the Reserve is raising rates, that typically means that the interest rates that we should be getting on our savings accounts, money market accounts, those high interest bearing accounts, even, interest rates on bonds, yes, we're going to go through this period of time where things where we see a little decline on the value of bonds, but over a period of time, it's actually a benefit. The safety in our portfolio, we're going to start to see higher interest rates there. So I think it goes to, what we're going to talk about today is focusing on what we can control versus what we can't control.
Yeah, that's the whole basis behind this conversation, right? Is there are things in life that we know are going to happen probably at some point. We just don't know when. So it makes planning very, very difficult. But there are things that you can control within your plan when you work with an advisor like Scott. So we are going to put this up online at lifemoneyshow.com. You'll be able to find it there, listen to it there, plus listen to past episodes as well as Scott's videos that he posts there. So a lot of content. It's kind of the content hub for the Searns Financial Group. So make sure you check it out there. But let's jump into this, Scott, and talk about these things that we can't predict. And we've got a few things on our list today. And I'm curious about how you go about constructing a plan for someone and how you account for these without really knowing the answer. So the first one, I'm sure you get this question a lot. Hey, when's that next market crash going to happen? Well, we don't know, right? We know that it's inevitable, right? The market cycles and it will cycle again. But how do you go about preparing for it when you don't know when it's going to come?
Yeah, and I think it's good to really understand, in all of these that we go through, Ben, is like, what is it that we can't predict? And just like you said, we don't know when the market's going to crash again. Would we guess? Can we assume that the market's going to go down? Yeah, At some point, again, I would make a good assumption that the market's going to go down. Is it going to go back up? Probably. How much is it going to go down? Can't predict that. How long is it going to stay down? We can't predict that either. So I'm not trying to, drive into the bad here, but I think it's good to understand all of those thoughts of what we can't predict, and then focus on what we can control. And I think, would you agree, Ben? Yep, the market most likely is going to go down again.
Yeah, I would absolutely believe this is going to happen at some point.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing. Is focusing on what we can control. It's just our psychological beliefs around the market. So knowing and understanding that it happens and that it's normal, and just first off is psychologically believing that, hey, this is normal and that it will recover. And, most likely. Now, of course, I guess we got to always throw out there the compliance likes us to throw out there, past performance is not indicative of future results. But history has shown over time that the market's recovered. I think also part of that psychological look of something that we can control is, do we take a short-term view or a long-term view? And right now, if you're taking a short-term view, it could make you really nervous. The market's been jumping up and down and up and down and all over the place. Versus if we take a long-term view and said, hey, what are your thoughts? Do you think the market's going to be higher in 10 years from now? 20 years from now, 30 years from now? What do you think most people are going to answer to that one?
I believe most people would think that it's going to be higher.
Hey, same for me. That's my belief as well. I think the market's going to be higher 30 years from now. So since we can't predict when it's going to happen next, I think it's our beliefs that, okay, it's going to be higher in the future, and then taking those beliefs and constructing a portfolio around it and really having good balance based on your age, based on your time horizon, based on how much money you might need to withdraw from your portfolio, but having good balance in your portfolio, meaning having assets on the safer side of your portfolio. I've always liked to nickname that the war chest. You could look at that as like bond funds. Having money on the safer side of your portfolio, and then having money on the growth or the equity side of your portfolio. Now, too much on the safe side, well, you might miss some of the ups during the rebounds, right? But if you have too much on the growth side and you're within 5 years of retirement or you're in retirement, then you might not have a place to go and make withdrawals from if that market goes down. So, I think it's really important to put together a plan, understand what your 5-year needs are from your plan, and then construct a portfolio, again, focused on those long-term beliefs versus these short-term reactions that we're seeing in the market. And then, a big part of that, and here's what we do with our clients annually is reviewing that and creating strategies of looking forward. So always sitting down saying, okay, hey, here's where we're at today. What do you need for the next 5 years? Has any of your goals changed? Has any of your thought processes changed? Where's your risk tolerance? And then continuously looking at and updating that balance. The other thing is believe it or not, but there's some opportunities when market, crashes come around. So again, getting off of that focus of okay, hey, this is a bad event, more focusing on the opportunity. That's an opportunity to rebalance, sell high, buy low in different items. And then it's also an opportunity, if you're sitting on some of that cash, it's potentially an opportunity to buy the dip. So those are some things that we can control, where we focus, how we balance our assets, versus just sitting there and wondering or worrying about when this could potentially happen next.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, let's talk about our lifestyle. And we, kind of tying into inflation, we don't know what costs are going to be, what our expenses might be in 20 or 30 years. We can kind of get an idea of what kind of lifestyle we want to live, I'm sure, right, Scott? But to really put a price tag on that lifestyle, you can probably be in the ballpark, but you just never know what's going to happen with the prices of things. So how do you plan for, expenses and trying to make sure you don't run out of money, but you really don't know what it's going to cost to maintain your lifestyle in the next 20 to 30 years?
Yeah, and if, here's one thing for me, and I'm going to let you kind of give me some of your thoughts as well, just to get listeners thinking. So one thing for me that I've seen change over the last, I'll call it 20 years. So I'm going to say I'm 39. I was going to say I'm just about 40, but I still like to go with that 39 number, right?
As long as you can.
Yeah, 39 years old. And when I was in high school, I remember gas was gas was somewhere around like 80 cents, 90 cents a gallon or something like that. So just to see that, we don't think about it, right? We think about it, but just to think, okay, 80 to 90 cents a gallon to where it's at today, what a change. That was the one that really, any that have hit you over the last 20 years?
Well, to play off of your gas, I can remember when it was common to say, hey, let's just go ahead and put $5 in the tank, right?
Yeah.
And you would be okay for a little while. Could you imagine putting $5 in now? You're having to fill up by the end of the day, right? So that's one that I always think back about. And it happens so slowly. You don't think about it day to day, right? Okay, it's now $1, $1.10, but now, at $3.30, $4, you're looking back going, man, this is 5 times in many cases what we were paying when we were, even just 20 years ago.
Yeah, you bring up a great point there. It happens so slowly. And so if we're not planning around it, it could also happen so slowly where it's just cutting into somebody's retirement savings, or they're not realizing what's happening. And then next thing 30 years down the road, based upon not planning, they're actually having to reduce their lifestyle. And based on our conversation too, I would have never guessed back then, right, that gas was going to be $3 to $4 a gallon. Who would have ever guessed that? I could have never predicted that. And I think the other thing is nobody could have predicted inflation being 7.5% year over year. And nobody's going to be able to predict what it's going to be by next January. Could it be higher? Maybe. Could it be lower? Hey, that's kind of possible too. So instead of trying to make all of those predictions, I think it's important to just plan for it, right? Plan for, hey, over time, like you mentioned, we might see this slow increase in goods and services. And how you should plan for it is by having money in equities. Equities can be considered stocks or stock funds. I call it that growth side of your portfolio. But, truly the, best potential way to outpace inflation is to have money or investments on the growth side of your portfolios. And I'm talking about equities here. And I would, highly recommend people go back to our podcast a couple of weeks ago where we talked about inflation. We gave a lot of good stats there on the average rate of return for stocks over a historical period of time versus what the average rate of, inflation has been. And equities has been that, hedge against inflation.
Mm-hmm.
The other way to plan for it is having a good idea just of what your cost of living is, what that lifestyle is. And then as you plan for your future, so as and this is what I call an income plan, that you want to add inflation onto those numbers. So if you're saying, hey, it costs me $75,000 a year or $100,000 a year to live today, just like we talked about that slow increase in the price of fuel, you want to add that slow increase onto the cost of your $100,000 to live, because it will cost more in the future, and you want to marry that up with your portfolio. So what that income plan is it's going to look at all of your sources of income. It's also going to look at all of your expenses, not only just your cost of living, but healthcare, Medicare, et cetera. It's going to add inflation to all of those numbers, and then it's going to align them with your portfolio to make sure that you've got the proper balance in your portfolio, and to make sure that you've got enough in your retirement savings to make all of this last. And it's going to then help a person understand if maybe they need to save more, or if they're already retired, that maybe they need, to be ready for the future. Maybe they need to cut back a little bit today, or maybe they're on the right track and to go ahead and spend and save some more. So again, not focusing on, is it 7.5% versus 2% versus 5%? We can't control that number. But what we can control is the planning that we do, and thinking and focusing around it.
I just think, is there a chance that gas could be $7, $8, $10, in 20 years? Who knows, right? But
Could
I don't
be.
think
Yeah,
many people
who
would have
knows?
said, hey, it's going to be $4 in 20 years when we were filling up. So definitely something to be thinking about there. Okay, so along those same lines, Scott, let's talk healthcare, because I don't know many different sectors that have seen a jump, an increase in costs that healthcare has seen over the last 10, 15 years. But we all are very aware of how expensive healthcare is. But who knows where healthcare is going to go, number one, right? The whole industry could get redefined and just changed completely. But we don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know what the costs associated with that are going to be. So we know this is a very key expense in retirement, right? You have to plan for healthcare. So how do you work this into the plan? Again, not knowing just how expensive, or maybe the prices back up some when things are restructured. Who knows? But how do you work this into it?
Yeah, and when we talk about healthcare, I think it's important just to break this down for people's minds, because that's kind of it's a good general term, but I mean, this goes as far as Medicare. I think that was, everybody's excited that, there's the cost of living adjustment this year for Social Security, but guess what also went up? The Medicare, right? Prescriptions, doctor's bills, and then one that I put a huge star next to each and every time that we talk about it is long-term care. I mean, that's in the event that you need some sort of help, right? Transferring from room to room, or going to the bathroom, or making dinner. I mean, this is part of the natural aging, maturing process of life, that some point in time we might need long-term care support. And that, I mean, rough estimates, but like full-time home health care, $50,000 to $60,000 a year. A nursing home, $90,000 to $100,000 a year. And that's today's cost, Ben. So just think about, I mean, I've heard, estimates that like those kind of costs could double within 15 years. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Now, I hope, like you said, some things on the healthcare industry get redefined. I did want to point this out. I don't know if you saw this in the news, and then I'll talk about how to plan around all this. But did you see about Mark Cuban's company?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's called Cost Plus Drug Company. I'm just throwing it out there because, I think prescriptions have gotten way out of hand, right? I think some of these stores and companies feel like they can just charge an arm and a leg for it. So hopefully people reading, go online, go to the Google machine, type in Mark Cuban's drug company, or I believe it's called Cost Plus Drug Company. And he's just trying to redefine the space a little bit, which is cool. What he's doing is just saying, okay, here's the cost for, what some of these prescriptions are, and then we're just doing an across the board profit margin that we want. And then here's what it is. And some of the items that I saw when I was looking it up, I mean, you're taking something that was $20, $30, $40, $50 down to $2, $3, $5. I mean, it was really cool. So hopefully that helps provide some benefit to somebody out there of maybe saving them some money. But I think when it comes to plan, we can't predict what any of these will be in the future. I would predict that most likely these costs are going to go up. Hopefully there's some people that come in to continue to redefine the space, so maybe some go down. But, I mean, instead of trying to predict what it's going to be, we just have to plan for it. And first off, first part is that, is that we need to save for it. I mean, there's just no other way to put it other than you have to factor this in. You have to start saving money and setting aside money, knowing that you're going to have to pay for healthcare. Back to the income plan that we just discussed that you should be putting together, right? Within 10 years or 5 years of retirement of how to make all of your assets last through retirement. Well, you got to factor healthcare into your income plan. A lot of folks, when I, sit down with them in that first visit, we're talking about their lifestyle and what their lifestyle needs are. And a lot of them have a good idea, right? Okay, hey, Scott, it's going to cost me $80,000 a year to maintain my lifestyle. But what they haven't added in yet or haven't thought about yet is the cost for Medicare, the cost for health care, and how much of that's going to come out of their Social Security. And so that's something that we feed in then to all of those income plans, because if they're thinking $80,000, well, it could actually be $90,000 or $95,000 a year to live just because of all of those additional healthcare costs. And then that one that I put a star next to, long-term care, well, there's two options that people can really focus on when it comes to long-term care and having in that area. Because when it comes to long-term care, some of the estimates I've heard is that 75% of people will need some sort of long-term care and 25% won't. How do we predict if we're going to be in the 75 or the 25? So instead of trying to make that prediction, is just have a plan. And there's two ways to go with that. One is you can self-insure, which means that maybe you've saved enough. Sometimes when you've saved into those millions of dollars range, maybe you've got $2 million, $3 million or more, then you realize that your assets, if you were to need that kind of care, that your assets could support you and pay for those long-term care bills. Or you can transfer the risk, meaning transfer that risk to an insurance company by getting a long-term care insurance policy. But just, sitting down, having that discussion and thinking through that, I think is the most important. And it's important to do the long-term care planning. I always tell people that, hey, start thinking about it and having those conversations around age 55. I find people start to actually get serious about it around age 60, but it's truly when you're youngest and healthiest because, and I just seen it this year working with some different clients, we're having those long-term care discussions. They finally decided to get more serious about it. And then just due to recent health changes, they would no longer qualify for a long-term care policy. So do it while you're youngest and healthiest because health can change and you may no longer qualify.
All right, here's another one, taxes. Well, we know this is a big part of putting a plan together. You have to kind of make sure you are preparing for taxes down the road, especially with all the money you're putting into retirement accounts and tax-deferred accounts. But, Scott, we don't know what the tax rate's going to be. We have no clue. We don't know what it's going to be next year, right? So what's it going to be in 2 or 3 presidents from now? I don't know. So how do you plan for it?
Yeah, and sometimes you look at it, hey, what's it going to be in presidents? But it could actually change every couple years, right? When Congress members change seats. I mean, taxes is something that could change every 2 years. And who the heck could predict that? So to me, instead of trying to predict it, how can we plan around it? And here's where tax diversification of your savings becomes so important. So let's just talk about somebody who might be still saving for retirement. Tax diversification is really important. What does that mean? It's where are you putting your retirement dollars? Where are you putting your retirement savings? I think we've been so trained. So if I said, "Hey, where do you put your retirement savings, Ben?" What's probably your number one answer?
401k or my Roth.
All right. So see that we're starting to get that second one in there a little bit. I like it.
Yeah.
So, but I think in the past we've been so accustomed to go, put your money in your 401k, put your money in your 401k.
Mm-hmm.
First off, not anybody who's saving for retirement, great job. But what I've seen, and I'll walk you through a quick story. I had a couple here. They literally saved everything into their 401k. Very little in, we'll call it like checking savings, but we're talking multiple millions in their 401k. Mm-hmm. And running some projections, and again, just projections, so we're not saying any of this is guaranteed what the future is going to hold, but just running some projections because of the required minimum distributions, the forced distributions that they would have to take from their 401k in their retirement. They could potentially be seeing a higher taxable income in their 80s than where they're actually at today. And if taxes were to go up in the future, well, then they're just, they thought, hey, we're doing a great thing today because we're getting this tax deduction. But actually, if taxes were to go up in the future, and if all this holds true, they could actually be paying more taxes in the future than they are today. So that's where tax diversification comes in. Not only putting money into your 401k, but then just like you said, Ben, maybe we need to start dropping some money into our Roth 401k or our Roth IRA. And then I'm going to add the third bucket in as well, which is that taxable bucket. Some people know this as like an individual account or a joint account or a brokerage account. But I highly recommend also starting to put some money in there because that's a bucket too that you can tap into before age 59 and a half. And so all of these different buckets are taxed in a different way. And I think no matter which direction tax rates go, by having yourself diversified through the buckets, it can then help you with where you pull money out from in the future. Mm-hmm. So that's as we're saving. And then the next thing is maybe you've already hit retirement. And so that's where you want to kind of think from a different perspective on taxes. And maybe you want to start considering Roth conversions. So back to my story of that couple that had everything in their 401k, let's just say now they're retired. Well, maybe they consider today's tax rates low. And if so, they might want to take portions out of that bucket and move them into that Roth IRA bucket, right? Getting them into the bucket where it grows tax-free and they can withdraw tax-free. Doing so, and this is really important, they're going to have to pay taxes today. But they might do so because they say, oh, okay, well, I think tax rates are low today. Tax rates are going to be higher in the future. I'd rather pay taxes on this money today and get it in the tax-free bucket. This could be a benefit. Is it meant for everybody? Not necessarily. Some people, based on projections, it looks like this may be of benefit. Others maybe not. But this is, again, part of our process, our year-end planning and tax strategy meeting. We're sitting down, doing tax planning, and saying, okay, what is it that we can do today, this year, to help put our clients in the best position possible? So that's something or a process that I recommend everybody go through.
Yeah, so important. All right, how about one more, Scott? How long are we going to live? If we knew that, planning would be pretty easy, right? We could narrow it down to the day and make sure we had enough money and we could spread it out and be perfect. But we don't know. We don't know if we're going to have a 30-year retirement or 5-year retirement. So how do you go about this?
Boy, aren't you right there? I mean, if we knew that, we could know exactly, hey, when we're younger, like, okay, it costs us $80,000 a year to live. Here's how much we need to save up. Mm-hmm. I think if we're retired, we can say, boy, here's exactly how much we're going to spend. You hear a lot of people say, well, can't take it with me, right? And this is really where it comes to that balance of figuring out how to live life today and at the same time be financially confident about your tomorrow. And it really comes down to planning, to having a financial and retirement plan. I think it just recaps everything that we've been talking about on this whole show is sitting down and having a plan, understanding your I'll say retirement timeline. So if you're still saving, when is it that you're hoping to retire? What does that lifestyle look like? So then we can forecast out how much that you'll need to have saved by that time. And then we can also forecast out how much you need to have on the growth side of your investments, as well as on that safer side of your investments. How much, if you're still working, how much you need to save to hit that point that we call financial independence, where it doesn't matter if you work anymore or if you want to go into retirement. So having a plan in place, rather than focusing on all these unknowns that we talked about today, is like having that plan in place where you're strategically saving and automating it. And then once you're within so many years of retirement, aligning your portfolio with what your upcoming withdrawal needs are, but also having some on the growth side of your portfolio, again, for that long term, help you keep up with inflation. And I'd say wrapping it all up is focusing on the long term versus the short term. Because we're going to see lots of ups and downs each and every day. Life's going to change each and every day, but focusing more on that 10-year, 20-year, 30-year picture or longer versus that one-day picture.
It's all about keeping perspective, and it's so important. But each of these things don't have a concrete answer, but they will impact you at some point. So being the best prepared as possible is the name of the game and the goal, and why Scott does what he does over at Sierens Financial Group. So if you do want to learn more, just start with lifemoneyshow.com. You'll find all our podcast videos, a way to contact Scott, but if you want to call him directly, you can do that as well. 847-235-6989. Scott, we got time for one quick question before we get out of here today. Came in from Harriet. She says, my brother tells me I have way too much money in the bank, and he's probably right. It's about $150,000 now. But I just like knowing that it's there in case I have an emergency. Is that really so bad?
Well, I don't think it's bad having $150,000. Do you, Ben?
No, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, quite okay with that. I'll say this is definitely somebody who's being prepared for what they can't predict, having that much sitting in the bank. But I'd say this is like part emotional, part logical. The logical side is, well, rule of thumb, having 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund, or having 3 to 6 months of expenses in the bank as an emergency fund. But then there's this emotional part too, and I see this all the time when working with clients is, even no matter what that 3 to 6 month number comes out to be, they still have more than that sitting in the bank as emergency fund, rainy day fund, reserve fund. And, that's okay. That's what makes them feel fine. It makes them feel comfortable. And it also seems that's what, keeps those emergencies from not happening, because when they do happen, they don't look at them as emergencies. They just say, oh, well, you know what? The car broke down, but that's why I've got this money here. And then they replace it, but they're not calling it an emergency. But I think also it's good to review this. And sometimes it can get a little bit out of control. And then, you've got too much sitting in the bank. And as we talked about inflation earlier, and inflation being 7.5% year over year, if you're only making 0.5% or less in your bank account, well, you actually just kind of, lost money, right? Based on inflation data there. So is it bad? Maybe not. But I would say don't let it get too far out of control. Really review what that 3 to 6 month number is. What was kind of your if you wanted more than that, what was the number that you needed? But don't forget, you're not making a whole lot in the bank, so maybe not be too conservative and review it each and every year, and then go ahead and invest your surplus.
Thank you, Harriet, for that question. If you want to send one in to us, we'd love to hear from you. lifemoneyshow.com. All right, Scott, we got to get out of here. But a great episode, and a lot to process and a lot to digest. So feel free to go back through it and listen to it. If you haven't subscribed to the show, please do that as well. You'll find us on every major podcasting platform. Scott, keep an eye on inflation for us. I'm sure we'll be looking forward to updates throughout the year as the market changes and inflation, the economy changes, and we'll try to do our best to keep people in the loop.
Happy to do it. Great conversation, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Your Life, Your Money. For Scott Sierens, I'm Ben George. We'll talk to you next time.
Sierens Financial Group is an independent financial services firm that utilizes a variety of investment and insurance products. Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management, LLC. AE Wealth Management and Sierens Financial Group, Inc. are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. Sierens Financial Group, Inc. is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein, provided by third parties, have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Sierens Financial Group, Inc.